Hi, thanks for joining us today. My name is Sarah Shoup, and I'm the founder of University Parent. And today I'm really excited because we have Tracy Carrion, and she's a young adult stress coach and also a college professor. And she's going to talk to us about how you can help your student develop healthy inner habits. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Absolutely. Tracy, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your background?
Well, as you said, I am a psychology instructor at Flint Ridge Community College here in Colorado. I teach developmental psychology, so I am with young adults a lot, and I love them. And so I also work with them and adults as well, just helping with things like stress and coping strategies, coping mechanisms. Also, I do a lot of speaking for the college and on my own on topics like emotional intelligence, um, stress management, and the science of happiness as well. So, really talking about and diving into all of those qualities that help us create a sense of well-being in our lives, as well as manage the challenges and difficulties that we have. And I've been an educator and coach and counselor for 25 years. So I've been doing it a long time in a lot of different venues and ways. And I've been at the college now for almost 7 years. So it's a journey of passion for me in so many ways.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. So one of the things that struck me when we first sat down and started talking was just we started talking a little bit about kind of the state of what it's like for students today. You know, they're in this very high stakes, high stress environment, and they don't necessarily have the skills that we all wish that they would have when they're in the classroom. And so a lot of times students don't do well, not because they're not prepared academically, but because they're not really prepared emotionally. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the things that you've seen with the students that you have interacted with, and sort of how you got into helping them navigate through those challenges?
Well, I will say I did come into the classroom with that intention, even 7 years ago. I started out in my professional career as an English teacher in the high schools. And I noticed then I was teaching low performing students in kind of a challenging area. And I just noticed that it was a lot of, that it wasn't so much content that was a problem as it was their ability to manage life and balance things. And so I went back to get my graduate degree in mental health counseling. And since then, I just started speaking and holding classes everywhere I could and doing whatever I could for all age groups and for all kinds of people. So when I came into the college, I came in with the intention of this being part of my curriculum. Like, how could I help um, increase these types of skills that I had for so long? And in myself, I tell my students all the time, I come to this very honestly. I did not, I was not born necessarily good at managing my own stress and so forth, and a lot of these other types of things. And so what I am teaching are things I've had to learn for the last 25, 30 years of my life. And so I came in, but definitely in working with the college students, I began to see even more of how much pressure there is on them. And also in developmental psychology, we know that they are in a time of great change. They are moving from really moving into true independence in so many ways, or at least into a world where they're going to be expected to be a lot more independent, and both financially and emotionally and physically, depending on where they live. And so I have just seen over and over again where even, students who seem to get the content really well, just not be able to have the, whatever you want to call it, be it grit, capacity to manage, the resilience, I like to call that emotional agility, but the ability to really step in and um, balance all those areas of their life. And so I see it over and over again. So I went into the classroom, making it a part of my curriculum in my classroom, where they are required. It's just another requirement. It's not meant to stress them out, but it is required to find a way to take care of themselves, like to find a stress management practice. And I am really big with mindfulness, so I teach them a lot about that. And I do ask them to do a mindfulness practice. And we do it in the classroom for 5 minutes a day before every class. And of course, there are students, and especially in the first month, where they're like, I don't get this and I don't like it. But then I begin to see changes. And so, and I've had students tell me it changes their life, that it changes their relationships, that their grades are better for those who really step into it. So, in terms of what I've seen the gamut of students who just don't have any coping mechanisms, who will say that, those who have ones that are not the ones we would want them to have. And I think that's really concerning to me, as well as to parents, when they go out there on their own, they're going to find coping mechanisms, but we want them to come in, or at least to discover good ones and healthy ones.
Absolutely. So, just in case we have parents today watching that aren't familiar with some of the things that we're talking about, could you talk a little bit about, your perception of like what is mindfulness and what is stress, and how do you present those concepts to a teenager?
Well, stress is usually a really easy concept, I say. How many of you ever feel stress and every single hand in the classroom goes up because they know what that is? I tell them I think that is the universal language. As humans, we know, or at least we have our own concept of what stress is. But I will go through the idea that there is good stress. And it's called eustress. It has a name, EUSTRESS, and it's really that which motivates us to excel, to do well, to have goals and plans and get off the couch and all of those kinds of things. And we need a little bit of that for motivation. And um, and eustress allows us to see to see obstacles as challenges and not threats, because I define stress for them as, okay, so there is acute stress, short short acting stress, which the body is really well designed for. We have a fight or flight system. We're aware of that. The body manages those moments of stress, and we need them for, like, if a car pulls out in front of us or we're walking alone at night, we need to be vigilant and on, you know, aware of what's going on. But it's chronic stress that is what I really talk to them about. And that's the kind that seems to be unending, where it's not just taking place in our lives, but it's taking place in our minds. Um, because the brain doesn't know the difference between what we're actually going through and what we imagine we're going through. And it will react the same way, and it will see those things as a threat to the system. And so the system will respond with fight or flight. And so I just try to tease all of that out for them, like how their brain is responding to stress, how their body is responding to stress. And they know it, they have felt it. And mindfulness is, when I explain it to them, it is, one way, and it is one of the most scientifically researched ways, which is why one reason that I really present it in classrooms and in talks and so forth, because there's a lot of research out there. And I know that the whole idea, like mindfulness, is a big buzzword now. We see it on the cover of every magazine, Newsweek, Time, everybody has it, giving it incredible powers. And so I do like to be really honest about what it can do and what it can't do. But things that we know that it can do scientifically is it can increase our ability to pay attention and to concentrate and to focus. But it also makes us really aware. Mindfulness is just awareness of what's going on in our head, awareness of the choices we're making. Um, it is sort of a global awareness of how our body is feeling, kind of the things that are running around in our mind, and how we're feeling about things, what we're thinking about things. And so to really be able to strengthen the capacity to become aware in the moment so that we can make choices based on that awareness and not just reactively, so that we can respond to situations rather than react to them. And so I do teach them mindfulness like breathing, mindful breathing, slowing down the breath, being able to um, what I call and I didn't make this up, but put the brain back online. Because when we get stressed out, we can't think clearly. We just react to situations. We choose to do things that we've always done to make us feel better in the moment, but it might not be the best thing for us. And so, and I'll tell my students a lot, like too much stress is like, when you plug too many volts into your, um, into your plug and then the breaker blows, our systems can become like that. And then we stop going to class or we stop doing the work or we can't think clearly. So mindfulness is a way just to bring the mind and the body back to the same place in the moment so that we can think more clearly and make choices about things and move forward with those choices from that place of awareness.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And when you're talking about it specifically for students, what are some ways that that you practice mindfulness? So you mentioned, there's 5 minutes at every class. Is that mostly through some breathing exercises that you do, or are there other things that you recommend parents and students try to work on that?
Well, I definitely teach them the breathing because it's pretty easy, portable. It can be done anywhere. It's I do tell them when it comes to mindfulness or anything that we do like this with our coping mechanisms, best to practice. And that's why I really try to set them up to have like a practice that they do at home. So we do things in class. I give a lecture about stress and mindfulness and different habits we can create for our well-being. And then I do ask them, of course, I can't know if they do it, but to take these and practice them at home. And so that would be like the deep breathing and how to really, and I have to really stress with them. They'll get the idea that meditation is about clearing your mind. And if I can't clear my mind, then I can't do the practice. And so I have to go over a lot of times the inaccuracy of that the human brain doesn't clear very often or very easily, and that's not even the goal. The goal is simply to watch the mind, notice what it does, bring it back to the breath, and so we have this whole thing we go through about what that looks like. So in class, yes, I do a lot of that. I will also introduce them to what I would call other habits of well-being or habits of happiness. And I find those to be mindful as well. So something like I will tell them that a practice they could do that, okay, so the brain has in it what we might call a negativity bias. We're really quick to pick up negative things in our environment. And there's a saying by a neuropsychologist that Rick Hansen that the brain is Velcro for the negative and Teflon for the positive. So we let positive things just slip away. We hold on to negative stuff. And so, in order to build a positivity bias, which is another practice you can do, I challenge them, encourage them to spend just a few minutes, 5 minutes a day, scanning their environment for positive things, like just looking for things that are good and noticing them. That they got a parking place outside, which is really hard on our campus. That the sun is out. That um, somebody held the door open for them and didn't let it slam in their face. Anything that's good, and not start questioning it or telling stories about it, but just noticing what's good. And then even trying to flip that then and becoming something that might be somebody else's good thing for them. Smiling at somebody, opening doors, but to do it mindfully, to start really making a practice of it so it's a conscious thing that's done, because then it works with the brain. The brain becomes wired to respond that way to life, to look for positive things. We work with gratitude, the idea that expressing gratitude to someone, writing down things that you're grateful for, and being mindful about that, really paying attention, and then taking time to think about it and reflect on the good in our lives. So, gratitude, random acts of kindness, actual mindfulness, practice. These are a few of the things that we can do.
Okay, great. So one thing that I think is hard for parents is, of course, like you don't want to see your child feeling stressed or having a hard time or having difficulty transitioning. And one of the things that we see a lot on University Parent is that, many of these parents can sense that their child is having a hard time, but it's hard for them to really know because they may be thousands of miles away across the country at school. And it's a little bit different if they're in high school and you can actually see their eyes and see how stressed they are. So what are some things that you encourage parents to do, whether it's when they're still in high school and they're struggling, or if they are far away, but the parent can really sense just by talking to them, or maybe by not talking to them because the student is kind of checked out, how can they be helpful? And what are some ways that parents kind of intervene? And because it's hard to get someone to practice mindfulness once they're sort of too far gone in some ways on the stress level. So I'm just wondering, like, what are some practical things parents can do to re-engage their student, or to even understand where they are in the process?
Well, one, I think as parents, and I'm the parent of a 14-year-old, so I'm just kind of in the beginning of that teenage years, and I know that it becomes more and more difficult to get them just to open up and speak to us. I think one of the best things we can do, and this is going to seem not necessarily on topic, but I believe that it is one that we work with our own awareness and our own sense of mindfulness, and that we become aware as parents. How do we respond to stress? How do, what are the coping mechanisms we have in play that we have sort of shown them in their world, and then become observant just simply of them. And if they are far away, listening to them. And of course, I do have to say, if we think that there's serious issues, in terms of our anxiety and depression, that of course I'm always for counseling and working with somebody to help them on a more intense level. If that's not the case, though, just being aware of our own, being mindful to our own, and then how we show up with them to really truly listen, to ask questions that we are open to hearing the answers to. And if they're not willing to open up with us, maybe when we are speaking with them, being willing to share our own state sometimes, like, and how we're managing it. So it doesn't become so much, especially with teenagers, you, but I had this happen today at work and it really made me nervous. And so then I had to take some time and just breathe. Have you ever done that? Kind of opening up the conversation, especially as they're becoming adults, and they are adults, and letting them see that we have to work on these things as well, and reflecting to them how we do that, modeling to them how we do that, and then hopefully opening up a space to answer the question, to ask the question. Are you finding it? What's good going on? What's great going on? What's challenging going on? And are you feeling stressed? And without feeling, it's such a balance, because we don't want to be necessarily pushy, and push them to where they're not speaking to us about it. But definitely listening and hearing what they say and responding to that. And then, as if we are working on our own state of mindfulness, sharing what we're finding for ourselves. And I promise it speaks to them, even if we're not saying, you need to do this, you need to do that. Like on the article I wrote for you, I suggested things like you could do family gratitudes and make that something. And if they're away, you could still start it, but tell them that you're doing it. And then when you speak to them once a week, or however often you speak to them, it can become something. Oh, can I write something into the gratitude jar for you? What are you grateful for today? Helping build that. Telling them that this is something you want to do. And then also I gave a video, and if it comes, I think, from parents that say, oh, hey, look what I saw in this, what do you think of this? And really just having a conversation with them. They are adult, they're young adults, and listening, seeing if they know what coping skills they have. I think it's really good to start with awareness of ourselves and then sharing that awareness with them.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks. And so when you talk a little bit about like the way that you've helped students on a one-on-one basis when you're coaching them, can you tell us a little bit about how that works, and what you see typically, and maybe some of the things that you would ask a student or that you would encourage a student to do to kind of move through whatever they're struggling with?
Well, as a coach, my coaching specifically is a blend of conversation and listening, but also sharing of information. And I like to start with them in a place of knowledge, one about finding out from them, on a scale of 1 to 5, what is your typical level of stress? What are your coping mechanisms now, and are they working for you? Do you have habits you want to break or that you'd like to start that might bring you better success or a sense of well-being? And then, I also love even just the question of, complete this sentence. A happy life is a blank life, you know? A successful life is a blank life. Like learning from them what it is they're really looking for and how they see themselves already heading towards that and what might be standing in their way. What are the obstacles they see between where they are now in life and where they would ultimately, like what their goal is for a year from now or 5 years from now? What are the obstacles that are currently in your way, and what are the resources that you now have that you could use to overcome those? But I also like to explain to them about habits and what those are and how they work in the brain. And the brain, and I use a lot of neuroscience in my work. So, how we learn habits neurologically, how we can change our habits, and why habits are so hard to break. So, I actually share a lot of that kind of information with them, but in different ways to open up the conversation. I do ask them to take on some type of practice for themselves, get a sense of what they're already doing, what might be comfortable for them to do. Mindfulness is, of course, one I really like to see them begin to understand and practice, if even just in small little bits, and then have the conversations about the differences that they experience through that process, even though it feels weird. Um, so there's and then, but also giving them talking, as I said, about happiness and gratitude and all the kind of qualities. So it's really just it's a blend of listening to them, having them come up with what they want to work on, but also I do tend to share information with them about how these things work inside of themselves so that they know that their behavior matters, that it makes a difference, like in their brain, but that it takes practice and time to do that. And we'll talk about particular stressors that might be going on and how we might, what might be their go-to to manage it. Do we typically, am I a fighter? Am I a flyer? Do I typically get in there and like create conflict, or do I typically like when something feels threatening, or do I typically like withdraw from the situation? And kind of get them to notice what their stories are that they create around things around experiences when they first go into them, and how those can be beneficial, but how they can also be harmful, and how we can anyway. There's a whole slew of things we can do, but it is sort of a blend of sharing information and then just listening and allowing them to create what works for them. But I do challenge them to try some things that might not feel comfortable at first because their brain isn't used to doing them, and that we have to try new things for a while for them to feel natural
Mm-hmm.
if we know that they're
Absolutely.
good for us.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Um, are there any other things that you want to share with parents about just ways that you are teaching students to really manage their stress, whether it's specific habits or just trying to think if there are any other kind of practical tips that we can have our parents take away today?
Well, I think a couple of things that I love to share is that if we can begin to see these things, be they optimism, resilience, the things we want for our kids when they go out there into the world. A lot of these are just skills. And we have to learn skills sometimes. Sometimes there are babies that are born more resilient than others, but not all of us are. So if we think of happiness and resilience and optimism and mindfulness and awareness and all of these things as skills, then we shift the mind from like, oh, you should just be able to do that, just overcome it,
Mhm.
to, okay, no, you have to practice that, you have to learn it, and your brain has to actually wire itself in a way that it can. And so we can't just, and especially young people, if they haven't been taught these skills, like they're just skills like math,
Mhm.
they're skills like riding a bike, they're skills, any skill they've ever had to learn. Um, and for some of them aren't easy. And then when they enter adolescence, the brain is in a very vulnerable place during adolescence. If we think of the brain as this constant construction area, it's constantly changing and growing and building based on our experiences. Adolescence is a huge time of renovation. Like the brain is renovating itself. And based on the experiences and the thinking that we have, and we all know as adults that adolescence isn't always easy. And neurologically, adolescence goes till age 25. So I'm not just talking about young, like teenagers. So we have to understand that what they learn right now is going to be beneficial for their whole life. Like that's going to become plugged into their brain as the way they manage. And if we think of them as skills they have to practice, then we become a little more like, okay, I, they just need the opportunity to practice these things and be encouraged in them. And so I think it's one, good to see them as skills, and one, to understand that they are habits. Just like, I tend to ask audiences that I talk to or students that I talk to all the time, do you have a habit you want to break? And everybody has some habit they want to break, right? And it's usually a behavior. I'm going to stop biting my nails. I'm going to stop drinking so much coffee or eating 42 cookies or whatever it is. They have like a behavioral habit. But we have habits of the mind, the way we think, the way we react to situations based on our thinking. And those habits are actually lead to the habits of behavior usually, but they're really important. And so if we want, they're not easy to break because the brain is like wired for them and it goes to them really easily. So if we want them to have better habits, one, we have to have patience. And we have to give them an ability in a way, in a place to practice different habits. And we have to, we have to give them kind of how to do that. We have to have the conversation with them. We have to have their buy-in, and that can take time. You know, when they're stressed out, they may not be able to talk to you about it right then, but when they've come down off of the stress, be able to have the conversation of, I realize I have habits of this, and this when I'm stressed out. I tend to eat if I'm stressed. I tend to get irritable if I'm stressed, and I know those don't work. So what do you do when you're stressed? And I want to learn some new ways of doing it. And kind of partnering them with that, I think is really important. And there's a lot of, I know there's probably a lot of really good books out there on how to do this and that encourage us. The brain is a wonderful thing. It um, it's kind of the good and the bad. It changes, it shapes based on our experiences and our thinking, and it's done that for our whole lives. But that means it can change and it can reshape based on new thoughts and new experiences. So I think just kind of partnering with our kids, opening ourselves up to those things that we can learn, and then help like inviting them into that space with us. Or, of course, coaches and counselors can be specific people, and college campuses can have help sometimes with those things and getting them involved with them. Sometimes they don't listen to parents the best.
Mhm.
But if we share information, if we have that information to share in little bits and as a part of our own reflection, then they may, and we open the conversation, they will open to us in their time.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much. I love the idea that all of these skills are are just like learning math or a new language. I think that frames them really nicely for students, and it makes it feel, not so like either you have it or you don't, but it's kind of something that you're always working on and can always get better at. So I like that
Absolutely.
framework.
I had a student once say, I love this information because I understand now why habits are so hard to break, and I don't have to be so hard on myself
Hmm.
for not being able to just break a habit. you know, I have to practice it. I have to work on it. And I have to practice a different habit to replace it. And so just seeing that and having some compassion for ourselves,
Mhm.
I think is really important, and patience with ourselves and understanding it doesn't just happen like that. And certainly for our, you know, as adults, it doesn't happen for us just like that. And it's certainly not going to happen for our young people just like that
Mhm.
if they haven't
Absolutely.
had if they haven't had the practice up till then, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, it's so scary because students they're in a brand new environment, far away from home. The stakes are high. Their parents are spending a ton of money. They spent all this time even trying to get into the school in the first place. And then for things not to work out or for things not to go well feels pretty scary. So I think the more we can
Absolutely.
do, to just help them, not feel like it has to be that scary, and feel like they can work through the outcome and get there by working through these different mindfulness techniques and sort of wellness techniques is so critical for them to understand. And
And
yeah.
normalizing that it
Right,
is
right.
part, it's normal to feel like that. It's
Mm-hmm.
normal to feel like that in adolescence anyway, or in life.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly when there's so many changes they're going through, their brain is changing in ways they're not even aware of. Their environment has changed. The pressures are there. And so, you know, that it's normal. All of that is normal. And it's just how are we going to, I always think it's like the missing curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
What what lessons are we giving them about how to navigate those changes and those challenges from the inside? We can have a lot of things about what they should do, but the truth is that how they kind of be on the inside is really vital to their ultimate result and experience with these things.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, if there is a parent or a student that's interested in getting in contact with you to learn more about what you offer and the coaching that you provide, can you share the best way to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. Well, one, I have a website. It's just www.tracycarrion, TracyCarreon.com. And my email contact through there, or my email is tracy@tracycarrion.com. And they can just send me a quick note and we'll set up an opportunity to talk if they want to. I do a free 15-minute consultation just to kind of learn a little bit about, you know, me or see if it's a good fit. And you can get a lot of information from the website about my philosophy and who I am. And if, you know, some clarity around some of this and so forth, and resources that I have online.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. So shortly we'll open it up to parents that have questions, and Tracy will be available to answer those questions in our Facebook group. So we will see you there soon. Thanks so much, Tracy.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay.